Let's be real for a second. Do you remember where you were when you first watched Homecoming King? Or maybe when you first binged Patriot Act on Netflix? For a lot of us, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Finally, here was a guy who looked like the modern world, spoke like us, and wasn't afraid to tackle the scary, complicated stuff, racism, immigration, global politics, with a swagger and a smile that made it all feel manageable. Hasan Minhaj wasn't just a comedian. For a hot minute, he felt like a voice of a generation. He was the cool older brother of political comedy. And then, the record scratched. If you were anywhere near the internet in late 2023, you saw the headlines. The New Yorker dropped a bombshell article that essentially accused Hasan of being a liar. They claimed his most harrowing, heart-wrenching stories, the ones that made us cry, the ones that made us angry on his behalf, were fabricated. The internet, as it always does, exploded. People felt betrayed. The golden boy lost his shine. He reportedly lost the gig of a lifetime as the host of The Daily Show. It was a cancellation event of epic proportions. But here is the twist that most people missed. While the headlines were screaming fraud, a quieter, much more complicated story was unfolding underneath. It's a story about the line between art and truth, the emotional truth versus factual truth, and the receipts that Hasan eventually brought to the table, receipts that changed the narrative completely for those willing to listen. So, grab your coffee or your tea, settle in, and let's talk about the censored truth of Hasan Minhaj. Because the reality is way messier and way more human than a clickbait headline. The lie that broke the internet. First, let's look at what broke our hearts. The New Yorker investigation alleged that Hasan made up 3 key pillars of his stand-up specials. The prom date reject, the story where his white prom date's parents reject him at the door because of his race. The anthrax scare, the terrifying tale of opening a letter filled with white powder in front of his young daughter. The FBI informant, the story about an undercover agent infiltrating his mosque and trying to entrap him. When we read this, the collective reaction was a gut punch. Wait, none of that happened? We felt duped. We felt like we had invested emotional energy into a fiction. But this is where the conversation usually stops, and this is where we need to dig deeper. The receipts video, the comeback. Weeks later, Hasan dropped a 20-minute video response. It wasn't a PR apology written by a crisis management team. It was Hasan, looking tired, frustrated, and armed with emails, audio recordings, and text messages. This is the part the mainstream news cycle largely glossed over. Hasan admitted that, yes, he embellished, he shifted timelines, he combined characters. But he argued that the core truth, the emotional reality, was 100% real. Take the prom story. The article implied the racism never happened. Hasan's receipts showed that the girl did reject him, and race was a factor, but it happened days before the dance, not at the doorstep. He moved the rejection to the doorstep for dramatic effect. Ask yourself, does moving a location of the heartbreak change the fact that a teenage boy was rejected for the color of his skin? Or does it just make it a better movie scene? Then there was the anthrax story. The article made it sound like a total fabrication. Hasan admitted the powder didn't spill on his daughter, but there was a letter. There was a scare. The fear was real. He dramatized the moment of impact to convey the visceral terror of being a high-profile Muslim American to an audience that might never experience that fear. He calls this emotional truth, and honestly, it's a concept we need to talk about. Why we felt betrayed, and why maybe we shouldn't. This whole saga forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. What do we want from our comedians? If you go to a Dave Chappelle show or watch a Richard Pryor special, do you assume every single anecdote is fact-checked by the New York Times? Probably not. We accept that comedians are storytellers. They are modern-day bards. They exaggerate. They paint caricatures. The problem with Hasan was the format. Hasan created a new genre. He stood in front of giant screens with infographics. He cited sources. He looked like a journalist, but he spoke like a comic. He blurred the lines. The engagement trap. We trusted him because he brought the facts. So when he slipped into stand-up mode and exaggerated for effect, it felt like a violation of the contract he signed with the audience. But here is the censored truth that Netflix and the media ecosystem struggle with. We crave the feeling more than the fact. Hasan's stories resonated because they tapped into a very real anxiety that millions of people feel. The story about the FBI informant. Even if that specific guy wasn't the informant, the reality of surveillance in Muslim communities post 9/11 is an absolute, undeniable fact. Hasan used a composite character to illustrate a systemic truth. Is that lying? Or is that art? The human cost of gotcha journalism. There is another layer here that is deeply emotional. In his response video, Hasan revealed that the New Yorker article omitted key context that made him look like a villain. He showed that he had actually reached out to the women involved in his stories to apologize or give heads up. He showed that some of the changes he made to stories were to protect the identities of the people involved, not just to make himself look good. When we strip away the celebrity, we see a guy who got trapped in his own success. He tried to take the specific pain of his life and make it universal, and in doing so, he flew too close to the sun of journalistic integrity. It's a cautionary tale for all of us. We live in a cancel first, ask questions later culture. We love to build people up, put them on pedestals, call them kings, just so we can watch them fall. The speed at which the internet turned on Hasan was terrifying. But looking back now, with the dust settled, can we see the gray area? Can we admit that maybe, just maybe, a comedian embellishing a story to make us feel something isn't a crime against humanity? The takeaway: what now? So, where does this leave us? Hasan Minhaj is back on tour. He's telling jokes. He's owning his pathological liar label with a wink and a nod. But the landscape has changed. The censored truth isn't about a conspiracy. It's about the complexity of storytelling. We learned that context matters. We learned that emotional truth is powerful, but dangerous. We learned that our heroes are flawed, messy humans. Maybe the stories weren't 100% factual in a court of law, but they were true in a way that matters to the heart. They sparked conversations about race, identity, and fear that we needed to have. If we demand that every comedian carries a notarized affidavit for every joke, we are going to lose the magic of comedy. We are going to lose the ability to laugh at the pain. And honestly, I'd rather have the laughter, messy as it is.